Lesson 13. This starts the advanced projects, and many of the models that you will create, the instructions will be more limited to general statements so that you use some of the knowledge you attained going through the first 12 lessons of the book. In this case, we're going to be concentrating on patterns and also the fact that it's a weldment, so we'll enter a different application within Creo. So I've already opened up our completed assembly, and I'm going to go to the Tools tab and just replay the assembly itself and our assembly datums. We put in our first very simple part, the plate, and then we're going to attach the bracket, and we're going to be patterning. That's why when I step forward through this, it's going through each one of the pattern elements. So this is the second component, the pattern of the bracket, and then there's going to be the pattern of the actual screws that you see here, socket head cap screws. So as I step forward through it, you'll see that this pattern. So it's fairly simple as far as the playback of this particular assembly. So we'll close the model player and we'll take a look at the base plate first. So I'm going to open it up in a different window, and simply I'll just go through the edit the definition of the first feature and then put it into a sketch view. And you'll see this is very simple. Got a couple of center lines, and we have our excuse me, 40-inch by 10-inch. So it's not a very complicated part, obviously. It's just a plate. Now, there are a lot of holes in here. Some have been put in while we were doing the assembly. These are for the bracket itself, but the other hole pattern on the outside here, you'll see we have 3 hole patterns. But the main one for the plate, we put in when we were creating the plate. I'll edit the definition of, open up the hole, take a look at the hole first. Edit the definition of the first hole. So it's a simple hole, through hole, 1-inch diameter, nothing fancy about it, and it's located from the 2 edges equally, 1.5 in both directions. Now, as far as the pattern goes, the pattern is again fairly simple. You have your dimensions in both directions. You have one end plane as the reference direction. We're not using dimension, we're using direction as the option here. Be careful because dimension comes up first. You're going to be using direction. And our other direction here, the second plane reference, is from the other side. So again, even the pattern here is fairly simple. And I'll close the window. All right, so let's go and look at our first bracket here. We have our base plate, and we have our mounting bracket. And let's open that one up. Now in this case here, its very first feature is a very simple section. We'll go back into that and you'll see in the sketch view that you have a simple angle bracket. You can actually use the palette for this if you wish. The palette itself here has different shapes in it, like the L profile. You could use that instead of just sketching it. It's a relatively simple feature, so sketching it is fine. I'm going to cancel that. All right, so we have a depth, and what happened here was that I, for some reason, when I do this, it cancels out my holes. I'm not sure why it does this, but when I played it back through, you can see that the holes became unavailable. So what I'm going to actually have to do here, this is in session right now, and I can't back up to get to the holes to show again. I'm not sure why it's doing this. I've seen it before though, so I'm simply going to close that, and you can see the same things here, and I'm going to close my full model because everything is in session. So I have to go and manage the session and remove everything that was shown previously. Now when I open it up again, back where I was, and here's my default view. I'm going to rotate it over, and you'll see everything is back. So it's a little odd what happens, but now that I'm in a new session, I do have to go and make sure that all of my model tree items are displayed that I want to see. So for some reason, again, when I went to that very first feature, which is the L shape of the bracket, it destroyed all my hole pattern. Again, I'm not quite sure why it does that, but I've seen it before. Now, as far as our patterns here, we can take a look at the rib. That's the first one. And let's go into the rib and edit the definition of that one. Now you'll see what happened here is that when creating the rib, we actually went in here and we offset a datum plane. So we created a datum plane within the command and we offset it from the existing datum plane out here. That gave us a sketching plane. And I'll edit the internal sketch of that. And you can see that we have an open section, not a closed section, because it's a rib. So again, it's a fairly simple section. I think I'll move this out here, like so. Simple section, but it is open, and a rib will fill everything in from these entities towards the solid. And I'll cancel that one. Yes. Let's see whether it crashes it. No, it didn't. I was wondering whether or not it would get rid of the whole pattern again, but it didn't. So as far as the pattern for that rib, it again is, this case, it's a dimensional pattern. It's not a directional one. So I tried to use a different type in each case. Direction, quite often, we're going to use fill, and this is dimensional pattern. So this 2-inch distance from the end here to the center is what we used for the increment distance. And we're only doing it 3 times, 1 direction. So it looks like what happens is that when I come in and out of this, it's going to fail my items, which is again kind of odd, but this one, while we're here, we might as well do a few other things. It failed the holes, and it failed the fillet. And again, I can't get that back no matter how many times I go back. So what we'll do here is we'll just go into the applications anyway and pick on welding and select the fillet. And if you open up your location, you'll see that it's looking for side 1. So for instance, let's click on the bottom here. That'll be side 1. And then in side 2, let's click up here. So it's a little bit different than what's in the book. So you can see it put a weld all along the back there. You could do a new set, and let's pick here and this surface. Let's delete that. New surface, new side 1. And we're on side 2. You see you can click all of these as side 2. I won't bother to go all the way around it. You can by just clicking through with your right mouse button, like so, and finishing it out. Add a new set. And in this case here, let's select this as the primary and then use these as all the secondary ones. work your way around. Right mouse button. And right mouse button. And you see you can do it a little bit different than it is in the book. So check to complete it. And you'll see that you have an annotation here that's shown. If you don't want to see the annotations, you can turn them off with your quick access annotation display button. If you want to be able to select on that, you can go over to your filters in the lower right hand corner. Oh, I turned them off and then did it. So let's see if it'll pick this up. It did. So I can click on it and you can see your properties, your text values. How about properties? So you can see that you've got some elements in here that you can work with and change if you wish. All right. Let's close that one. These are a little bit bigger than they were before, obviously, for the welds. And again, while we're here, let's work with what has not failed. In this case, the holes, counterbore hole. I'm going to go to the very first one. And I won't, let's go and let's edit the definition of that one. Here's the, you can see it's a 1/2 inch 13 hole, counterbore hole. Fairly simple. And let's edit the definition of that pattern. Now in this case, used a direction pattern also, but we turned off a couple of them. You'll notice that the one in the middle here, if I click on them, it'll activate them. Now you got some extra holes. So again, because this is in session, I can close this window. It's still over here with all the missing, well, actually the new weld, but the missing pattern because it has failed. And that failure isn't going to come back unless here's my weld that failed. And my hole that failed. So again, it's actually good practice here to at least to understand this. If I close this and then I reopen it, it's still going to be wrong because it's going to look in session first. So if I open it and I look over here where it says in session, it's going to read this first. So what I need to do, I didn't save anything, so what I need to do is I close everything and I can go into my manage session and erase not displayed and get rid of everything. Now when I open it, mounting system, everything is there and the holes are there again. But it is a new session, so I hate to do this again, but I have to. Your system manager can turn these things on for you. You can set them as such, or you can turn them on for your own config and save it also. So we're going to go back in and we will open up that part again. Hopefully we will get another failure if we do some changes. And we have the last set of holes here, the pattern. So we just inserted one hole. Simple matter, first one. We can take a look at it. It's not a special one anyways. Now, what's actually saying down here, cannot redefine pattern member while the pattern leader has been omitted. So the first hole in the pattern I must have gotten rid of. So the only thing it's going to let me do right here is take a look at the pattern itself. So let's look at the pattern. And you can see all the ones that have been removed. Those are the white dots. And let's go into so you can see we took out all of these by just clicking on them. Obviously you don't want these on. And we get a failure again. Let's see if we can undo it this time. Nope, we can't. So again, you can see that this particular thing is somewhat sensitive because we've got this fillet weld built into it, and I think that's the primary problem. So again, you're getting a lot of practice here. Hopefully you can understand what we're doing, and that's erasing again things that are in session, so when we open it up it goes back to the original item. So those are our components, which are fairly simple, and they've got a variety of different types of pattern commands that were used. Now, since we're in the assembly here, and again, yes, I have to turn everything on if I want to see it. So we have the pattern of the bracket. So let's edit the definition of that. And you could say this one, see this one is direction again. So we have the first direction is 22 inches. And then the second direction I'm sorry, we only have one direction. We have one direction, only doing a one copy here, so 2 instances. We're not going in the other direction. It's fairly simple in that case. Now, the next one, you're going to have a situation you're going to put in a hole. And when you're inserting the hole, what you want to do is you want to insert it in the base plate. So we've got these holes down here. Now, what we can do is we can actually come in here, take a look at some of these items, and let's see what happens if we hide this one. So we can hide that other one that gets rid of some stuff. And how about if we hide the, no, it's not going to let me hide these. I can hide them here. So let's see if I select them all, hide. Oh, I know why. Hit the wrong one. That one's already hidden. Hold down my shift key to gather them all and hide. Alright, just so we don't have to see them. So we have some holes that were put in here. And these holes we're using references, but what you have to do before you start the process is that you have to activate what you want to work on. So in this case here, we want to activate the base plate before we try putting in the hole. And this hole here is going to use as references the axes from, that's an external reference, axes from the bracket. And it's also going to use the top face of the plate. And it is a threaded hole. Now, once you have that hole in there, you're going to be using that one for, let's see if I can find it here. Here's our hole on the outside. We talked about that. Here's our other hole. So once this hole is created, you simply pattern it using a reference. So let's edit definition of this one. So the word reference is going to come up. Since we're selecting holes that already exist, or the references already exist as a pattern, therefore when you select that hole and you want to pattern it, it's going to know that all the axes of this particular feature here of the bracket are going to be referenced, or they're going to ask you whether you want to reference them. You don't have to use a reference pattern, but if you do select the first instance here, which is what you've created, and you're going to pattern it, one of the options it gives you all the time is the ability to pattern it as a reference. In other words, to reference the existing pattern which is in the bracket itself. So you don't have to do anything, you just have to select reference. In fact, reference comes up as the default. So it depends on how you're approaching it. If you don't want to reference the existing pattern. You could have patterned this hole in a different manner, but we are aligning it with each one of these as you go. All right, I'm going to click on the system here, the mounting system, and activate it. Right mouse button, activate. So we're back here. So basically you're creating a hole inside the plate, even though the assembly is active at that particular time. Eventually, you're going to want to lump everything together as a pattern, as a group, before you pattern it. So before you pattern the instance over here that includes everything, holes, the bracket, the socket head cap screws, you're going to want to have all of this done, and then you're going to use that and pattern the bracket as a group. And I want you to follow the steps very carefully in the book, because in the book it actually has you do something that creates an external reference, and then later you have to go and get rid of the external reference in order to group these items in order to then pattern them. So very careful, always follow the steps in the book. Sometimes my lecture gives you some other alternatives, but you don't want to get in a situation where you're trying to correct something because you think you know what's going on. Let's see if we bring everything back and hide. There we go. All right, so basically what you're going to do is you do it in sequence. It will have you change some things and edit them, and that editing is very important. That teaches you how to do something a little bit that something might be wrong, or that you want to correct, or I should make it not just always wrong, but you want to alter references in order for something to work or work in the way you want it to be. So basically follow steps in the book. Sometimes it tells you to do something that's kind of wrong, and then later it has you go edit that so that you see the editing process. Otherwise, if you do it correctly in the very beginning, you pick the correct references, then you won't be able to make that change. So for instance, when we're putting in this socket head cap screw, you want to make sure you follow the steps, but the cap screw, when you're selecting the items over here, make sure you follow the book first, and then when a few pages later, it'll actually change those references so that you can use them in a different way. So you'll be able to group things. If you have an external reference, in many cases it won't allow you to group them. And again, the book will explain this in detail. Now the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to put in the socket head cap screw, and I think I'll add something here. Maybe we'll put one in over here in the hole. So I'm going to go into my 3D model space, into the Pro library, accept the legal terms. I think it's here. Cap screw. Hexagon head cap screw here, and what we were selecting is this one. And remember, you might choose educational or you might choose commercial depending on where you're going to use this. If I have a commercial system, so I have to choose this option. You can also play around with the View 3D model. It depends on how your system is set up, whether or not that'll work well. Download here, and I'm going to open, and basically I'm going to take mine and extract it to my desktop, which by the way I've already done. So on my desktop somewhere I have that same part. I just extracted it there. You're going to extract it into your directory. I already got it in the one directory, so I didn't want to put it in the same thing. So I'm going to go and close the browser here, and I'm going to click on Assemble, and I'm going to go into my desktop and select this one instead. And this is a 1-inch diameter hole, so I'm going to go by diameter here. And the length, I'm going to go and select 275. Open. Here's my first selection. This has some interface already. So if you go to your placement tab, you'll see that this is already selected, that surface for the thread. And I'm going to come over here, select the hole. I know it's not a threaded hole, but I'm just putting it in there. And you'll see that the interface has been created on that standard part already, the bearing surface underneath. And you want to come and click on the top of your plate if you're going to practice this one. Little mouse button. You'll see we've got one. Now, once that's selected, right mouse button, and we're going to pattern it. These commands are up in the ribbon also, the dashboard, in this case the ribbon. And you can see automatically reference comes up because it knows that hole was part of an existing pattern. So we're going to keep that. Check. We have all that. So again, you can add those if you want, just a little bit more practice. Now let's see what else we have. I probably missed a couple of things. The very end here though, I think we have you go into the Tools tab, Reference Viewer, and click on Dependencies, and you can see this pattern. I didn't like that highlighted. So Reference Viewer for the whole model. Maybe we should open this up completely. So we've got all the different components in the assembly. Parent-child relationships. Show the base part plate, and you can see what's in the base plate. So this will show you the references and the dependencies. You'll be able to track your external references with this also if you still have one. All right, this concludes lesson 13.